Athena lay curled inside her nesting area. The thick padding beneath her body was damp with heat and sweat. Each contraction came like a heavy wave, rolling through her muscles, forcing her body to tense and release in slow, silent agony. She didn't whimper. She didn't cry out. Her jaw tightened. Her claws pressed into the floor. Her eyes stayed wide open, focused, alert. The same eyes Daniel had seen countless times before missions began. Daniel stood quietly outside the enclosure. He knew that look. It was the look of a canine who had stood at the edge of danger and never stepped back. Between those labored breaths, memories seemed to surface. Athena had once charged through smoke and chaos, her nose skimming the ground as she tracked a fleeing suspect. She had stood perfectly still in front of a bomb-laced backpack, waiting for Daniel's signal. Every scar on her body told a story, stories never spoken, yet never forgotten. Back then, Athena endured pain to complete a mission. Today, she endured pain for a different reason. Not for orders, not for applause, not even for humans, but for the small lives waiting to enter the world, the next generation she was bringing into existence with her own strength. And in that moment, Daniel understood something clearly. This might be the hardest mission Athena had ever faced. Athena was never meant to be ordinary. She was a Belgian Malinois bred for precision, speed, and unbreakable focus. From her first days of training, she learned to read the world through scent and sound, through the smallest shifts in movement and breath, tracking fugitives through darkness, detecting explosives where a single mistake meant death, standing between danger and the people she was assigned to protect. In years of frontline service, Athena never failed. Not once. Her discipline was absolute. Her reactions so sharp that Daniel didn't need words. Sometimes all it took was a subtle change in her breathing for her to move. She lived for commands, waited for them, trusted them. But behind that flawless performance was a bond no manual ever described. Daniel was the one who fed Athena every morning before sunrise, the one who cleaned blood from her fur after long training days, the one who checked her paws for cracks when winter froze the concrete beneath them. And on nights when Daniel was exhausted, when he sat down on the cold floor, back against the wall, head heavy with silence, Athena would leave her position. She would walk over without being called, lower herself beside him, and gently place her head on his knee. No command, no reward, just quiet understanding. That was the Athena Daniel knew. Not just a canine, but a partner who had carried his burdens as faithfully as she carried her own. Athena was quietly removed from the front line. There was no announcement, no ceremony, no final command. One morning, Daniel clipped the leash onto her collar and walked her past the training field without stopping. No tactical drills, no explosive simulations, no alarms cutting through the air. Instead, their days changed shape. Health checks replaced combat routines. Careful monitoring replaced high-speed pursuits. Mornings became unnaturally calm, so quiet that even Daniel felt unsettled by the silence. Athena noticed it before anyone said a word. Whenever a training whistle sounded in the distance, her ears still snapped upright, her body tensed, ready to move, but it didn't respond the way it once had. She was slower now, heavier, her steps more deliberate. Daniel saw the conflict in her eyes, the instinct to run, the discipline to wait, the confusion of a body no longer built for battle, but for something else entirely. He knelt beside her one morning, resting a hand against her shoulder. This wasn't weakness. It was transition. For the first time in her life, Athena wasn't being trained to confront danger. She was being prepared to protect life, not through force, not through obedience, but through endurance, with fragile lives growing quietly beneath her ribs. Athena was quietly pulled from the front line. No final drill, no farewell run across the training field. One day, the alarm stopped calling her name. There were no more tactical exercises, no sharp whistles cutting through the air. Instead, her days were filled with medical checks, gentle hands instead of rigid commands, unnaturally quiet mornings that felt heavier than gunfire. Each time a distant training whistle echoed across the compound, Athena's ears still snapped upright on instinct, her muscles tensed, ready to move, but her body no longer followed. She was slower now, heavier. Her steps carried weight in a different way. Daniel saw the conflict inside her, the soldier trained to respond instantly, and the body preparing for something it had never been taught. He understood then. Athena was learning a new mission. For the first time in her life, she was no longer trained to fight danger. She was being taught to endure, to survive for lives that depended entirely on her. The veterinary room was silent. White lights, soft movements, people standing back, giving space. Daniel sat against the wall. No uniform, no leash in his hands. Just a man gripping his own fingers, trying to stay steady. Athena didn't cry out. She didn't whine. She breathed slow, heavy, controlled. Her eyes stayed open through every contraction. When the puppies arrived, one by one, Athena moved instantly. She turned her body inward, shielded them with her frame, cleaned each tiny life with careful, deliberate strokes of her tongue. Then one pup didn't move. The veterinarian stepped forward. Athena lifted her head. No growl, no bark. She simply nudged the weak pup closer, pressing her chest and belly against it, transferring warmth with everything she had left. The vet whispered softly, "Let her be a mother first." Daniel turned his face away. For the first time in years, he couldn't watch. Athena never left the nest. She refused food until every pup had fed. She stayed curled around them, her body forming a living barrier. Daniel watched and realized something profound. This wasn't a K9 waiting for orders. This was a mother protecting the future. The weakest pup survived. No one spoke. The room remained still. Months passed. Athena grew thinner. Her reactions softened. The sharp edge that once defined her began to fade. The decision was inevitable. Early retirement. There was no ceremony, no medals, no applause. Only young dogs growing stronger every day, beginning their training, carrying her blood, her instincts, her legacy. The training field buzzed with movement. Young K, 9S, sprinted, tracked, responded to commands. At the edge of the field, beneath the shade, Athena lay quietly, watching. Daniel stood beside her. Athena would never return to the front line. But every mission carried out today, every life protected, carried a part of her forward. Some warriors protect the world with teeth and strength, and some mothers protect the world by giving birth to those warriors.